and welcome everybody to Joey's Spotlight, where we have people from all different backgrounds, all different professions, all around the world discuss all sorts of different topics within the veterinary and animal advocacy community. And as you know, my name is Colleen Beasley, and I am so excited to be here with you all today. I'm joined by our other wonderful co-host, Mr. Scott Fine. Scott, how are you doing?
Colleen, good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm excited. This is going to be a good panel today.
Absolutely. Probably one of the best and the most important podcasts that we've ever done. And based on the response so far, it's definitely the most popular that we've ever done. So I'm really looking forward to this. There's going to be some really good information given out here. And I hope as many people as possible will either listen live or listen to the replay.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And please always feel free to chime in the chat if you have any questions. We're going to do a little introduction, and then later on we'll be sure to get to those questions. But we're excited to have everyone here with us. And with that being said, before we begin, I just like to make it known that any views and opinions that are expressed on this podcast or any of our podcasts are those of the individual authors, and they don't necessarily always reflect the official policies or positions of Joey's Legacy. So just a little disclaimer, please just remember, be kind in the chat. And then if you have any external questions or concerns, you can always feel free to reach out to me or Scott. With that all being said, we're excited to introduce our panelists today. We have Patty Coyne, National Coordinator for Titers for Pets, which is an Arizona registered nonprofit. We have the wonderful Dr. Jodie Gruenstern and also the amazing Michael Infanzon with us. How are you all today?
Excellent. Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So do you want to just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I will. I'd like to do a little intro and then turn it over to Dr. Jodie and to Michael. And, most of us get to the point of being aware that over-vaccination can be a problem, and it happens to everybody. And I think I suspected it back when I was vaccinating my kids, but I became acutely aware of it when about 20 years ago, and it happened to one of my puppies. And I kind of knew what was going on, but I had never researched it. And sure enough, everything that I had suspected actually came true. And 3 years after it happened, it was a puppy that I had raised, beautiful little puppy, and it was vaccinated for rabies. And within 2 weeks, it was head tilt and turning and, GME. And I mean, the owner probably spent, she wouldn't tell me how much, she didn't even want to know. And then a lot of people feel that way. But I think the best estimate I got from her was $1,000 in 6 years. And, it just broke my heart. And then 3 years later, one of the breeders in the pedigree came to me at a show. She knew I was coming and handed me a file. And in that file were the related dogs, and the ones that she knew about that all had encephalitis, which is a form of GME. And so it was like wide open. Now herself, she believed that it was some inherent problem in the breed. And I believe that there's genetics involved, and we know there is, as well as the over-vaccination problem. And I do wear two hats. I'm embark liaison for the Yorkshire Terrier breed, and we actually have that in our survey. And I've actually taken samples of dogs that have been like so over-vaccinated, it's crazy. And the gal I rehomed the dog with said, "Oh my God, how is that dog still alive?" And, we just go, ah. So whatever the issue is, there's always solutions if you pursue common sense approaches. So I'm wearing two hats with that. And I learned a long time ago, well, actually, a lot of you might know me from like 6-7 years ago, because I worked with a former advocate, and I did that on a national basis too. So I grabbed all the organizers, and we're really getting some great organizers now. I'm really encouraged. So it takes a lot of people to do this, and it's not a spectator sport. And if you look to veterinarians to be the ones that are going to change this, there's a lot of reasons why they don't. And one of the reasons that I'm so grateful for Dr. Gruenstern, because she's actually one that's standing up. And on our website, we have Dr. Margot Roman. Now there's others that all know this, but they're busy in their own practices, and there's reasons they don't. They're fearful, they're of retaliation. And so it gets to be kind of like an underground operation, and it shouldn't be. The legalities of this and the regulations should fit more with what the reality is. And I learned by a lot of mistakes of kind of what worked and what didn't. And it was that process that brought me to realizing that I couldn't do this alone. And that's when I kept opening doors, and somebody introduced me to Michael. And you know, I'm still a neophyte. I really feel that. I've become a lot more politically savvy as a result of that. And it's just really important. The one thing that I think just mystifies all of us is, why don't veterinarians understand this? And when their light bulb goes off, and I mean, the light bulb went off for Jodie at one time too. It does for everybody, because they get out of school, right? And but there's some that just don't seem, for one reason or another, either they just can't give up the financial part of vaccinating every year to bring clients in or whatever. But in part of my life, there was, it's a 12-step program. I'm on the co-side of it, an enabler, or was, and there was a quote, and it kind of went like, people can really learn and grow if they are not constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. And that's a brick wall. And we're being fed by big pharma and big industry. And, you know, why aren't the holistic vets able to come to the table in this? Why don't we have surveillance that can show that we can do this? Well, that's why Titer for Pets that was formed. So we can deal with the Titer thing. We can make exemptions more uniform across the board. We can try to get the CDC to make it easier to report. And there's a test sitting in the wings that will in-house test, including 0.5 on a rabies titer that needs to be tested. These are all things we can do, but we got to start somewhere. So with that, Dr. Jodie, thank you.
So I met Patty about 5 years ago when I first moved to Arizona, but most of my life and veterinary career was in Wisconsin. So I graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison Veterinary School in 1987. And probably my background in regards to vaccines and titer testing is a little bit special, because I had Dr. Ron Schultz as one of my instructors for veterinary immunology way back when. And he was very instrumental in this realm as far as reaching out even to the AVMA, the American Veterinary Medical Association, in teaching them about what we should call core vaccines, which includes distemper, parvo, and rabies. And he also did research for probably almost every vaccine manufacturer in regards to preparing vaccines, and then even moved on to helping companies develop titer tests. So he has done a lot of research, and probably 25 years ago, I sent hundreds, if not thousands, of blood samples from dogs, and also actual titer test results that I often ran at Michigan State and then sent on to him. And so he accumulated this wealth of information of titer test results on dogs. And that, combined with his other research, was able to then develop his own recommendations as far as what do those titer test numbers mean. So if you want detailed information on what is a titer, what does immunity mean versus just being vaccinated, I wrote a blog article that's pretty detailed and actually enumerates specific numbers. And that's on my website, which is docjodie.com. And so you're welcome to read all of that. And as we go on with our discussion here, I can share with you specific numbers. And that can help you and or your veterinarian make specific decisions whether or not your pet needs to be revaccinated. So kind of what our whole point with this is a little bit twofold. There's, first of all, a discussion we could have about distemper and parvo, and then another discussion about rabies. So the legislative efforts have to do with the rabies vaccine because it's a law in most states that you need to give your dog a rabies vaccine on a certain schedule. Distemper and parvo, there is no legislative effort needed because there's no law that says you have to vaccinate your dog for distemper or parvo. Yet many pet parents are misinformed about that and feel pressured to still over-vaccinate their dogs for distemper parvo as well. And there is a lot of research, good evidence that shows that not only is it not necessary, but possibly detrimental. So the more education we can get out there for pet parents, other veterinarians, and also facilities that have their own incorrect requirements, like doggy daycares, kennels, groomers, that are telling people you need to show us proof that your distemper parvo is up to date, that kind of thing. So, you know, I am not at all anti-vax. I am definitely against over-vaccinating. And how do we know if a pet needs a vaccine or not unless we do a titer test? And how do we know if they even responded to their vaccine? So if we've learned anything also in the past couple of years, it's that getting a vaccination does not equal immunity. So we really should be talking about, if we're concerned about protecting our pets and our community, then we should not only be allowing titer tests to be accepted, we should be requiring titer tests to be done, because that is what will demonstrate that a pet responded to the vaccine and actually developed immunization. So I'm going to leave it at that and pass on for a little bit more legislative talk to Michael. And then if you guys have some specific questions, if you want to come back to me for details and recommendations about how and when to vaccinate for what and how long maybe it lasts in reality, and all of that kind of stuff, I'd be happy to go in more depth.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Dr. Jodie. I just want to hit on this a little bit. You know, there are individuals or people watching today that don't feel that they can get anything done in their states. You know, I'm a lobbyist, and I heard a quote a while back: a good lawyer organizes and presents the client's facts to help them succeed under an existing law. A good lobbyist seeks to reshape the law to help clients succeed with the current facts that they have. That's my job. My job is to help reshape the laws that will help the health of our pets. You know, lobbying is an industry grounded in the First Amendment, you know, the right to petition your government. Now, a lot of people don't understand that you have that right on the local, state, and federal level, but it's really hard to get in the door. And that's where a lobbyist comes in. Most individuals, and a lot of small companies as well, can't afford a lobbyist. I mean, it's expensive. It's you know, kind of on the same track as attorney fees. Talking with Patty about this issue, and I've been a dog owner almost my whole life. You know, how do we get this legislation done, and not only here in Arizona, but in other states as well, with there being such a cost prohibitive, the word I'm looking for is cost prohibitive, you know, arena that it's in. So I kind of came up with a plan and kind of bounced it off of Patty. You know what, we can crowdsource lobbying fees. I'll reduce my fees and we can just kind of go with it from there. And, you know, my firm, we can lobby in 11 different states right now. And that can always expand as well. And I'm registered to lobby on Capitol Hill, as well as most of the municipalities in Arizona. So that being said, is take the information from that I've received from Patty, which is about a 3.5-inch notebook full. It's like drinking from a fire hose. But trying to take all that scientific information and narrowing it down to what the law says and how do we change the law to something that's, conducive for pet owners, to, optimal vaccination, optimal immunization. And like Dr. Jodie was talking about, it's not over vaccinating. I took that 3.5-inch binder and existing law and changed 2 sentences, and we almost got it passed here in Arizona 2 years ago. And we're still working on trying to get it here as well. But that's kind of from the legislative aspect. It's really, I think of my job as pretty easy comparatively. It's talking to politicians and getting them to understand where all the science comes in and how we can actually line up legislation and revise statutes to what's best for the state.
Well, I don't know if I would consider talking to politicians easy, but we're glad for people like you who know how to do it to help us walk through it. So I appreciate that. All right. Patty, did you have a chime in you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I do. And one of them is that we all have our misgivings, when people go through this, they're just like adamant. They want to be like campaigning on every corner, and we need to have a united voice. And if we don't do that and we split it up, we lose power. So if you have 17 different groups trying to do this, we got a problem. So it's like we need to have that unified voice. And that's part of the plan that I came up with, Michael, and the website Titers for Pets. And how we do this legislation is really outlined there pretty well. And it's not that we're not going to change that. We'll refine it as we go. It's like any other process. Get better at it. How do we get the message to people? But the real key is to unify it. And the way you unify it is not with social media, but with email. You can get state specific information there. And I'm working on the MailChimp thing, or our mail thing, because we need to deliver it to each state. And I've talked to 3 people that haven't said they signed up and it didn't show up. So I'll work on that. But that's really what we need. And we have, that I know of, the people that have told me there are 4 bills ready to go next year. And 3 of them I've worked with in the past and I know quite well, and we're here to support that. So, and what Michael pretty much said, but didn't elaborate on, is that the language, the simpler the language it is, the less resistance you're going to have. This is not understanding that we need titers, but legislating it. And it's like winning a debate, right, Mike? Yeah. So it's a whole different deal. So yes, we need to get this done. And I could tell you a whole lot more about what I do and don't do, but it doesn't matter. This mandate needs to change because it affects too many pets, and only, as I'm going to tell you, a small percentage of pet owners actually know. So you can't just, I took one of my vets and converted him. And so right now, Colleen, if you put up that graph of the Titer information. Okay, so I did this. What I did is Dr. Margot Roman, she did a download, and this was, I extrapolated the data from the download that she ordered from Kansas State. And only certain information is in there. But one of the things you go to a veterinarian with, and they say, oh, they're just magically sure that the protection is going to fall off immediately. So this was just an early attempt for me to say, no, it doesn't. Some dogs may need 2, and some dogs maybe need 1. We don't know. And the surveillance of that is lacking because there's no industry interest in doing that. But we, the people, the pet owners can. And so that you can let that go. We'll put that up on the YouTube as a link too. So that's the first thing that people have trouble with when they go to a vet. They just don't believe that they last. There's magically going to drop off. That's the first thing I address. So
Yeah,
I'll
so
let
in,
that go.
in that regard, if I can add to that, Patty, that what we learned is that the fastest titers fall is in half each year or even hold better. So depending on how high the titer starts, we can actually sort of extrapolate how many years before you would actually technically even need to do another titer. So maybe this is where I should just back up a little bit and even explain the basics of what a titer is. First of all, it's a blood draw. So we're not injecting anything. We're drawing blood, and then we're sending it out to a lab. And for rabies in particular, ideally Kansas State. So that was the data that you were just looking at. And we're looking at how much antibody immunity is in the blood from vaccines that were given in the past. Now, for diseases like distemper or parvo, you could have an antibody response in the blood showing that you're immunized or protected from mother's immunity that was passed on, which is short-lived and will go away, or it can be from a vaccine, which is long-lived and goes away very slowly, if at all, or it could be from natural exposure, which can happen as well. And so an antibody titer is what we call humoral immunity, meaning you're measuring antibodies in the blood. Now you actually have a whole nother part of your immune system, which is called cellular immunity, and that is not measured by a titer test. Cellular immunity occurs at your nasal passages, in your gut. So when you're exposed to something, your mucous membranes will fight that right away. And even if you were never vaccinated, even if you have poor humoral immunity, you may still be able to fight something off just because you have great cellular immunity. Now, in addition to that cellular immunity, it's wonderful to be able to also rely on antibody immunity, which is then in your blood, and that's what the titer is measuring. We also know that with the humoral or antibody level immunity, there are two levels to that. One level is called sterilizing, and the other level, which is a lower number, is called memory immunity. So if you are vaccinated and you have a certain number, depending on the disease, so for example, for parvo, we know that the sterilizing level is 80. So this is an actual number, 80 or more, that could come back from the lab when you send that blood out. And if it's 80 or more, and it's the sterilizing level, then if your pet gets exposed to parvo, it will sterilize it. It will nullify it. It will just wipe it out, and you won't even know your pet was exposed because it has this high level of protective immunity. If the number that comes back from the lab is less than 80 in the case of parvo, but is still more than 20, 20 is the memory level. And this has all been determined based on research. These are real numbers. If it's 20 or more and it's a memory level, the body remembers this exposure and goes, oh, okay, I'm going to fight this. And you might not feel so great, but you will fight it off and you will be protected. You're still immunized. So we have all these different levels and these little nuances to kind of understand about this. So when you're a newbie to this and the laboratory sends back your report and it's at a sterilizing level or more, the lab will report in that to the veterinarian and to the pet parent reading this report that no boost is needed if it's at a sterilizing or higher level. However, if it's less than that, the lab and probably the veterinarian will say, you should get a booster. Now, technically, if you really understand all these nuances, and especially if your pet has had problems with vaccination in the past and you're trying to avoid having another even more serious reaction, for example, then if you have this knowledge, you may want to still say, okay, well, it came back a memory level. I'm good with that. Maybe my dog isn't at a lot of risk either. So really, as a holistic veterinarian, I like to have a conversation like this with my clients specific to their pet in making a decision of whether or not that pet should be revaccinated or not. And we put all this information together, their lifestyle, their risk, all those kinds of things. So this is the kind of information that we need to get out to, other veterinarians, showing them, actual reports like Patty just showed us. And so that they really start understanding and feel comfortable with the nuances of everything. Because veterinarians are a stubborn group, and I am one of them. And it can be very hard for us to change because we're fearful. We don't want to do the wrong thing. So, we need support of our peers. If we do something wrong and we don't have peer support, then we're in trouble. And, not everybody is as rebellious as I am. So it takes a little time, and it takes a lot of support from clients, and clients have educated me. Technicians that have crossed my path have also educated me. And so I thank all those people that in the beginning were receptive to spending a lot of money to have titers done every year, so that I could say, we don't need to keep doing these titers. They're still holding. Let's we don't need to keep doing it. And so that's how we learned all of this. So I would just encourage anyone, listening that's on the fence about all this. Once you understand it, this is crazy common sense. It's good science. Our laws are archaic and they need to change. And definitely, unifying in this realm is exactly what we need to do. I was so lucky in Wisconsin that there was a state statute that said veterinarians, based on their own, whatever they wanted to do, could provide an exemption. So I always wanted to do a titer test because I wanted those pets. I wanted to know they were protected. So I would use that information to then provide a letter along with saying, okay, this pet has a chronic disorder. It has cancer. It has diabetes. It has, an immune-mediated disease that we don't want to rock the immune system by giving an unnecessary vaccination. So I would combine that information with the results of the titer test and then send the letter out if need be, depending on what the situation was. So that is something that every veterinarian can begin to do, and we need to put pressure on the powers that be, and continue to reach out, and thankful for lobbyists like Michael that can help us do this with a coordinated effort.
That's amazing to have you break down the science behind it, because I think not being professionally a veterinarian, I have no idea what you could tell me the information, but unless you broke it down like you did, it would be so hard for me to consume in like bite-sized pieces. So thank you for going through that. Are there any big what are people coming to you with big misconceptions that maybe you want to clear up on surrounding, you talked a bit about titers, but just in general vaccinations and things that maybe, you want to set straight a little bit?
Probably the main misconception is that if your pet was vaccinated, that means it's protected. So there's a very small percentage of dogs that have been vaccinated for rabies that actually never responded. And we should want to know who that is. If our concern is protecting the public, then we want to know which dogs have gotten rabies vaccines and are no responders. And that is a real thing. If you have vaccinated your pet year after year after year after year for distemper or parvo or for rabies, and then you do a titer and it's low or almost non-existent, then your pet is a poor or a no responder, and giving another booster isn't going to boost. It's going to do nothing. So that's why the importance of understanding how much a pet has already been vaccinated when you draw the blood and do the titer and get those numbers, and then put that whole picture together to make a decision. Do you do another booster, or
Mhm.
do you say, you know what, this pet's a no responder, we better not take him to the dog park. We better not take this pet to places where he's maybe at risk because he's not going to mount an immune response.
Yeah. So, we do have a couple questions coming from the chat, and one of them, I mean, you kind of described the lab work and procedures with the titers. So is there any corruption that is done within like the lab work that you are aware of? I know some people are worried that, the tests might be skewed with their pets, or how, like, if any of that misinformation between labs is corrupted. So is there any case that you are aware of that has happened that should concern people, or that should make us more aware of that?
No, I really don't think there is. I have used Michigan State. I have used Kansas State. I have used IDEX. I have used the in-clinic titer test kits. I don't know where a question like that would be coming from, except for there is a circumstance where, if you don't understand how titer testing works, you wouldn't understand why you could draw blood 1 year and have a certain number, let's say 16, and then the following year with no vaccination, have the titer go up and be 32. How could that be? So this is good. This is going to be complicated. First of all, if the individual had exposure, that could be an antibody immune response. The other reason is, and if there's anybody in the audience that's actually involved in laboratory testing, they could weigh in here. But titer testing and giving that number 16 could be actually, at that time, instead of 16, it could have been a 32 or it could have been an 8. And I think it has to do, I'm not a lab technician, but I think it might have to do with subjective color reading. So early on, when I got back a few like that, because I was testing every year, and I was like, how could this have gone up? Dr. Schultz said it very well could have been read out as a 32 instead of a 16 the year before. And then what we would be saying this year is it's still 32. Okay, so I don't think that's a very adequate answer, but that's about the best I can do on that one. And that also is a real thing. And so I think that could lead some people to be like, okay, what's going on here?
Right.
So there is science involved. That's not a mistake, and it's not a corruption.
Yeah, I think
as far as Kansas State, they were involved. They were the laboratory that was used for the Rabies Challenge Fund, which was fun. It was a huge study that was done. Dr. Schultz was involved with that. Dr. Dodds, who has a fabulous reputation as well, was involved with that. And it was all funded by pet parent donations. Not any, there weren't vaccine manufacturers involved with funding that. And so I really think that, the universities that are involved with doing the titer testing, there's not any kind of corruption. Certainly with things too, like the in-clinic testing, it's a little complicated. There's some subjectiveness sometimes to reading some of those tests. But again, I don't think that's corruption.
Right. So there shouldn't be any major concern if there's a subtle, like if someone sent results, they got theirs back from a local vet versus like a different, maybe more professional, or not more professional, but a different certified vet, and the results were different, then
it would need to be, first of all, it kind of needs to be on the same sample. So, and we did do that. We would split samples and send to Michigan State and University of Wisconsin-Madison. There were even some times where we were kind of testing things out, and I would ask Michigan State, do you have serum left? Because I want to send it to University of Wisconsin and see. And there is going to be that little bit of fluctuation just because of methodology.
Right. Got
But
it.
I don't think that changes the validity of the decision you're trying to make based on those results.
That's great. Awesome. And Patty, did you have
Yeah, I
something?
did. There are so many variables to this. I mean, the vaccines themselves have antigenicity, if I'm saying it right, it's like a concentration of antigen and how much, the dog's health status, the age, the stress level that are under. And on our website, we actually have picked apart ways that you can actually enhance the immune response. And there's different things on there. I think it's turkey tail mushroom and colostrum and spirulina. All of those things have been shown to boost immune system. And I have a friend that last week, before she got her titer test, took her immunized dog where puppies were all being vaccinated to play, because she knows darn well that that's going to boost the immune response. So a healthy dog that does have a competent immune system that is not immune compromised can do that. And so it's like people say, oh, I don't want to take my dog out, I'm fearful. No, if your dog is healthy and it has immunity, which you can verify with the titer, and there are studies that show that 14% of puppies parvo distemper adeno, and that was done by Lori Larson at University of Wisconsin, they weren't immunized. So when people go, oh, it didn't work, well, did you check? You know, it's kind of like that. So I'll leave it at that, but there's tons of variables here and moving parts, and we're just trying to unify it so we can speak with one voice and get Michael to get this through.
So just to clarify that just a little bit, because we are mixing a lot here, talking about distemper, parvo, and rabies. The rabies vaccine is a killed vaccine. So when puppies or young dogs are vaccinated for rabies, they do not shed. And so their presence with an unvaccinated will not help, will not promote any kind of immune development on that unvaccinated. But if you take an unvaccinated puppy and put it with puppies that just received distemper or parvo vaccine, those puppies have been vaccinated with modified live vaccine. And so they are shedding, and then that exposure can create immunity in those puppies without actually vaccinating, without actually injecting them. And that was also something that Dr. Ron Schultz taught years ago, is the safest way to vaccinate your puppy without exposing them to a vaccine, which could be detrimental, is to expose them to a freshly vaccinated puppy. But exposing them to adult dogs that are healthy, that have their own immunity, they are not actively shedding. So that is not going to create any immunity in your unvaccinated pet.
Patty, I've got a question. Could you speak to the, as far as the legislative effort, how many states are involved? Any progress being made? Are we close in any states?
Well, it's kind of we are an uphill battle. Delaware did get it passed, but it's kind of a combo bill that has an exemption backed by a titer. And what we want is a clean titer bill, and then make sure the exemptions are specific and it's, you know, it's very, uniform. It should be uniform. I mean, come on. So yeah, we have opposition here. It's not, either people don't know, and we are going before legislators, and they're no different than the average public. Maybe they might know something, and we had a greyhound owning senator here that, because of her breed, was well aware of it and knew it. And so every legislator is different, but most of them are going to go to their, allopathic standard vet and ask if it's a problem. And they're going to go, oh, no, it's not a problem. And so the thing is, we've got to we have a 10-second elevator speech, and Mike knows how to cut through that. And the sad thing about it is there is some political division about it, which it shouldn't be there at all. So Mike has got a very challenging job, is to break through that. And no individual person can get to a legislator like somebody that's on the inside who has, you know, and this year we'll be able to mix and mingle, which is where this stuff happens in the hallway or wherever. So he has the opportunity to do that. And it's just really the thing that's needed, because you cannot, they're so busy. They don't have the time. They just don't.
Okay.
Just
So we do have a good chance, Scott, and everybody thinks, well, it's common sense, we should be able to do that. I don't care how good the bill is. Getting it done the first time is not usually going to happen. Mike just passed a bill. It took him 7 or 8 years, and it's common sense, but it is what it is. But the more people that come up and speak with one voice, do the email list, start participating instead of sitting back and going, well, I just want to follow what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, keep up the good work. No, this is the USA, and, you know, your voice matters. And I mean, I have a dog, a Tervuren or some breed, and it's got the Constitution in its mouth. And it's like, yeah, it's we the people that you need to listen to us, and we have the science. Let's do it. So that we do have hope. Yes.
Okay, good.
So just a piece of advice for folks other than those here in Arizona. If you want to get something like this done in your state, send an email to Patty, send an email for the Titer to Titers for Pets. Okay. And then I'll get in touch with you and we can start working on some strategy. I've said this to Patty for a few years now. It's my whole objective is to play chess when everybody else is playing checkers. And that's the best way I can put it. We've had some people trying to say, well, you know, I know as much as you guys do, and so I'm going to do this and do that. And they throw something up on the wall to see if it sticks. And it actually screws over the pet owners in that state. So, you know, just contact Patty. She's the national coordinator. And then we can sit, the person, whatever state you're from, and I can sit down and, because like I said, we can, right now we can lobby in 11 states, and that can always expand pretty quickly.
Okay, good.
We are now a nonprofit too, and it was a lot of pet owners and breed clubs and training clubs all got together and funded over $300,000 to the Rabies Challenge Fund. It costs more than that, but there's a lot of breed clubs that know this and they're behind it, and so hopefully we'll get some good funding from this. And it is really going to help if we get it done in one state, and we've got a lot of participation here, I know, and Jodie's here, so. But it can go down anywhere.
Right. Well, if you guys have a moment, I have a few more questions from the chat. Everyone's really hopping in there, which is we love to see. One of them being, so this person was told that in New York, even if a vet offered an exemption, New York does not recognize exemptions for rabies. So if your dog's titer shows no need for a rabies booster, but the state says it's mandatory, what is the risk of just not getting a rabies boost? Does the liability set in just for failing to meet the state mandate to vaccinate, or does the liability set in when or if the dog bites and passes on the rabies?
I'll hit on that a little bit. You know, there's the liability end of things for first and foremost, and I'll speak on Arizona. If you don't follow the law, you can be fined. You can have your pets taken away from you. You know, that's first and foremost, you know, and which we don't want to have done. There's not a whole lot of individuals running around saying, well, let me see your rabies vaccination card, which is a good thing, but we still want people to follow the law and have good laws. As far as liability, if your pet bites somebody and passes rabies on to another individual, I have no idea, and I wouldn't even want to think, you know, that's a possibility.
We do have exemptions in Arizona. A lot of veterinarians don't know about them or will not use them. As far as the dog taken away, that doesn't really happen. In the case of a bite, if the dog has one vaccination, they usually can be in-home quarantined, but it's by case, sometimes with a veterinarian. And these are all similar laws. And they kind of changed their view on it because they found out that dogs that had been in an altercation that were past due on their rabies and had a lower titer to start with, when they were revaccinated at that point, they developed a higher titer, quicker and stronger. So, I mean, that kind of messed up their whole narrative. And so they don't really take them away. And in a lot of states, they won't. But you don't want to play roulette, I guess. But really, most of the people that know about this, like I've got Yorkies, my Yorkies stay inside 98% of the time. That's what they do. And my eyes are on them all the time. So no, we don't. I would rather have it be regulations that made sense. But when it doesn't, I'm not putting my dogs at risk. And I'm just one of probably a million people, millions that do that. So the law should sink, but when it doesn't, we got a problem. And if that was about health, then the public health veterinarians should recognize that as an additional problem. So that's my 2 cents.
So regardless of the law, you should still get your dog titer tested for rabies so that you know if they are protected or not. Then whatever you decide to do as far as the law is concerned, you will know that if your pet does bite someone, that your pet will not have or be giving rabies. Also, dogs don't carry rabies. So they would have to have been bit by a rabid animal before they bite another person. And then the other thing is, the way the law usually is that if they do bite someone and their rabies vaccination is not up to date, regardless of the titer, then they need to be quarantined for 10 days. If the vaccination is up to date, then they can be quarantined in your home for 10 days. If the vaccination is not up to date, then they need to be quarantined in an isolation facility for 10 days. It's not that your dog will be euthanized or taken away from you or anything like that. So the other thing is, the other part of the law isn't so much that you need to get the rabies vaccination. It's actually that you need to get a license. And in order to get a license, you need to have the rabies vaccination up to date. So you can make your own personal decision what you're going to do in regards to getting a license. As far as getting fined, they will fine you if you don't keep your license up to date in some communities or some states where somebody is keeping up on that paperwork and sending out notices to let you know that you have not renewed your license. So the liability is on the owner if that pet bites someone. Right. Even if the rabies vaccination is up to date and the licensure is up to date, the liability is still on the owner for that bite.
So regarding titers testing, you're talking about the process, drawing the blood and all of that. If a person in their local town, like their holistic vets don't have blood labs, like what is a way they can find a place to get it tested or a veterinarian who can do that testing for them?
Well, any veterinarian or veterinary technician can draw blood. There needs to be an account set up. So as far as rabies testing, Kansas State is the gold standard of where that needs to be sent. And so there needs to be a veterinarian that sets up an account with Kansas State. And so you need to get the blood drawn. Somebody has to have a centrifuge to spin the blood and put it in a tube and then send it to Kansas State. And you have to fill out paperwork and have an account set up. So they need to connect with a veterinarian somewhere that has an account set up. And I don't see any reason why any veterinarian wouldn't want to set up an account. It's no big deal. Set up an account, charge something for the blood draw, charge something for interpreting the test, whatever. You know, there's no reason why every veterinarian shouldn't have an account and get this done for people.
That's what we think. And Jodie, I mean, it makes so much sense to her, but in fact, what people are dealing with is they can't get someone to even draw the blood. And if they do a titer, they'll charge like $500 or $600 for a rabies titer. And I think you might have missed this, Jodie, because you're so busy, but Dr. Lori Koger is now processing for outside clients. And we'll get that link up on the website, but she is doing that now for people. So the challenge is not just setting up an account, but it's even just getting a blood draw, because there's so many people so resistant. And it just, and especially now when vets are so busy and, you know, they don't have time to do it. So that's what we're kind of up against. So it's a lot of education that needs to be done. And I guess around your old alma mater, Dr. Jodie, around Madison, they went out and actually went to the towns and to the vets and educated a bunch of them. And they're actually taking titers and the information like Jodie sends in, and they're honoring them. And the same thing is happening around where Dr. Roman is in outside Boston. So, I mean, there's that approach too, but that's very time intensive, and it takes a lot of dedication. And it's also delivering the message to the veterinarians, so you're not threatening them. You know, their belief, look, we have belief systems from A to Z. And it's like, let's just get in the middle where it makes sense and practical, and it's no skin off your nose, just do it. So we just have that. And plus, I mean, there's a vet shortage now. My vet, one of my vets, and Dr. Jodie knows who, he had to go down to 4 days a week because he couldn't get enough help. And he'll do them for people. Just contact me in Arizona and I'll set it up. He doesn't have time.
I just want to throw out there before we're too general about that is that most states have a law that you have to have a client-patient veterinarian relationship, which means face-to-face, in order to diagnose, treat, manage disease. So we're maybe walking a fine line about running a blood test on a pet that you've never seen. So I would protect my colleagues out there by saying, make sure that if you're involved in anything like that, that your state board is okay with that. And for that matter, you could maybe even get somehow in trouble with some other state's board because you're taking business away from a veterinarian in a state where, you know, you don't reside and you're not seeing that pet that resides in another veterinary state. So I think what we want to encourage is for veterinarians within the state to have, they could have Titer clinics. That's another thing that you have information on the website about, Patty, is setting up days where a veterinarian can see multiple animals come in, do a cursory exam, have a record, medical record, and then draw blood and get that sent out for large number of dogs at, you know, of an affordable price. And so we need to find, I think, several veterinarians in every single state to try to be part of that kind of a movement as well.
Yeah, I've offered.
We don't want to alienate the veterinarians, so we need to educate. And there's no, I mean, I came out of veterinary school the same as everybody else, and I'm totally on this page. And I think it's just a matter of them understanding. And I think, you know, the bottom line should be, you know, we want to do what's best for the pets.
Exactly.
So unfortunately, our time just went way too quickly and we're wrapping up on an hour here. But we've had some really awesome questions in the chat that weren't able to be answered, kind of like, does over-vaccination cause autoimmune disorders? And is there a titer for heartworm, flea, tick? Or I want to help, what can I do in my state? So all these great questions that unfortunately we won't be able to get to in this panel. But if people do have these questions and want to know more, where can they go to maybe find some of their answers?
Well, if you give me the questions and Dr. Jodie the questions, we will try to answer them. But I would encourage people to go to our websites and blog and read about it.
Awesome.
Okay,
So-
so here's our homepage, and if you scroll down, you will see the get involved, like right there. It keep going, or action alerts, sign me up. And then if you go to the get involved tab, go up to the top line, that is the whole plan. And it, that's the plan for how we're doing this. And Mike has a lot of good information on there of how we need to do it and why. And again, this is about creating one voice. About titers, that answers some of the questions. The other tab on the top, hun, there you go. And our donate, we have to update that because we're going to be a nonprofit now, and we are hoping that we can get funding. And also in each state, when they can crowdsource too, and they can do that by organization, because when people know there's active legislation going on, all of a sudden the interest, like, it goes tenfold up. And until it gets to that point, they're not interested. But to get it to that point, we need a lot of people signing up and saying, hey. And so we're just pushing, we're pushing on all fronts. And like Jodie said, the veterinarians, we could divide this up. My vet does them on Thursday afternoon, and he does a cursory exam, but he doesn't have time to do the whole 20-minute chat beforehand and everything. So he'll do the exam and look at the dog, but it's like, hey, would you collect the information, email me, and we'll schedule it in. And so far, the 2 or 3 people that have asked me about that, they don't follow through. So unfortunately, his practice is closed. He's running tight, but he supports this immensely. Now he went from not understanding titers, not thinking that he's doing his job, like, is the puppy really immunized? So he's added that. That's for parvo distemper, but this is something that just takes every one of us.
Colleen, Scott, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. We appreciate you all, and thank you so much for sharing all of your insights. We couldn't do it without you, and we will look forward to putting this up and spreading the news even faster so that we can make some change in this world.
Good.
Excellent.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.